Mr. President, allow me first to wish you a happy New Year's. Thank you. And on the other hand, to thank you for accepting to doing this interview, which is the 10th interview since we started with these first year meetings, which are a classic already. Last week, an article came out in France, for example, in a weekly, and making an article against me, and in particular focus on the fact that I am the journalist who interviews you every January 1st.
So they are afraid of the interview?
Yes, because it's a very frank conversation. To tell the truth that cover them.
An interview to tell the truth they cover up. Thus, you can review those 10 interviews, 10 consecutive years, what we said about the year that passed and the projections of the coming year.
What has been done too, and each time these interviews have also a character that allows you to make a balance of the year that finished and open perspectives on the new year.
To those who do not like the debate to open, then we open a debate. We like the debate a lot, the debate of ideas, the battle for truth against so much manipulation. Therefore, I am the one who thanks you for opening me this window of opportunity. When we started, these interviews had been issued on paper. It was another century, another world. And now these interviews run very hard on the known social media and platforms.
President, the interview is going to be, like every year, this time divided into 4 parts. We're going to talk about domestic politics, the very important topic, also the economy, a fundamental topic. We are going to talk about technology and society precisely because of what you just said about social networks. And we will end up by talking about international politics, correct?
Right.
So I wanted to start with the question, which is the question about democracy in Venezuela. In Venezuela, the year 2024, the year that just ended, has been a very electoral year. There have been presidential elections on July 28th. There was also the referendum for the Guayana Esequiba. There was also the popular consultation on August 25th on participatory budgets. Also the election of the judges of peace in the communes, and also this year that begins, there will be local and regional elections. There will be also a whole set of parliamentary elections. In other words, Venezuela, since 25 years ago when the Bolivarian Revolution began, has been characterized by the high intensity of these elections. But recently you have said that you are thinking of an eventual constitutional reform to inject more democracy in Venezuela. So I consider that there is also already enough democracy. What do you think it's necessary to add to the Venezuelan democracy?
Well, indeed, there are several issues. First of all, the account given now that the Constitution turned 25 years on December 15th is very auspicious, very positive, because despite so many conspiracies, so many attempts of coup d'etats, of the coup d'etat that we were able to reverse in April 2002, of the economic war in different phases, of the psychological cognitive war, of the national, international political war, we have been able to see blooming the main proposal of the 1999 Constitution, the construction of a participatory and leading democracy. It was said by that time, at the end of the 90s, Commander Chavez began to work on the idea of overcoming the old, exhausted democracy of parties, representative democracy, because supposedly being a democracy, well, it is without a democracy, well, it is a great limitation truly to the one who is the owner of the sovereignty of the power, which is the sovereign, the people. And we can say that the ideas and proposals of 25 years ago were fulfilled widely and fully. We have had 31 constitutional elections, 31 elections, regular, permanent, on due time, and flawless elections. Presidential elections held on due time, despite all the wars and blockades. There have never been excuses to postpone any presidential election. Elections for governorates and legislative councils, which is the state power. Elections for mayors and municipal councils, municipal power. We have had 7 referendums, including the referendum of the Guayana Esequiba, to address key fundamental issues. We have to recall a referendum that was very significant in 2007 for a constitutional reform, which we lost by 20,000 votes, and we immediately recognized the result. We have to remember the referendum of February 2009 to make an amendment to the Constitution, because in Venezuela you cannot change a single comma, dot, word of the Constitution without bringing it to a referendum. It is a constitutional mandate and a constitutional right of the people. Now, beyond that, Commander Chavez initiated in 2006-2007 the construction of a direct popular democracy with the foundation of the first communal councils, then the development of the concept of commune, which is adding the communal councils and giving the neighbors of the power of self-government. We have strongly resumed the idea of direct democracy, of neighborhood community democracy. In this case, the construction of what our people call a new communal state, a new modern state, within the idea of Bolivarian socialist modernity of the 21st century, not within the idea of the failed modernity of the Western world, not of postmodernity, which was a critique of modernity. In this case, we are trying to build up a new concept from the Constitution of 1999. And the results have been and are extraordinary. This year, in the year 2024, we have done 3 direct consultations with communities, 2 consultations for projects, for allocating budgets for community projects which were decided, defined, planned, voted, and approved by the popular vote that I describe as direct, secret, broad, majoritarian. This involved the approval of thousands of neighborhood projects to solve many times acute problems that the bureaucratism of the old state does not address, does not sort out. I was a witness in a region called Guatire, Araira, here in the state of Miranda, of a project of a containment wall for a main access road to a productive area in the route of La Margarina, and how they were asking the mayor there for years the containment wall because all the access road was going to fall, and the mayor never gave them an answer. And we, the community, in one of the consultations, the first one, approved the project. The direct resource was allocated around $10,000, that is equivalent of $10,000, and the community has built up the wall in just 4 months. They made the wall in a fantastic way. It was completed, a safe wall, and they had money left to repair a medical center and to recover a school, which shows you that direct democracy, neighborhood democracy, with the participation of the people's eye, is infinitely higher, much more efficient than the old and obtuse, bourgeois, worn-out state, which we still have out there, which is like a strange coexistence between that old state, which does not end up solving problems locally, and that telluric strength of a new state that is emerging from the foundations. We also did at the end of the year, on December 15th, a beautiful experiment, because the National Assembly approved the organic law of communal peace justice, and they were elected in Venezuela with a direct popular vote. 15,000 justices and peace justices of the territory of the neighbors 15,000 principals, 15,000 substitutes. This is not disseminated in the world, because in the world what interests them is to repeat that there is a dictatorship in Venezuela, that there is no democracy, and that the only democracy that exists, they are democracy. From the north, from the west, this degraded, decomposed collective empire, and already in the final stage of decadence. And not to say that here in the south, in the global south, in South America, there is an experience that is being born beautiful of popular democracy, direct democracy, the democracy of the neighbors. So we have had a wonderful time to prove that it is possible to build up another way of doing politics that is possible, necessary, and urgent for humanity to propose new models. And from there, from that debate, a very powerful proposal emerged. It has been very well received by the entire Venezuelan society that from January 2025, we advance towards a constitutional reform that democratizes the entire state, that democratizes the entire society, and that advances towards a process of strengthening a new way of doing politics, of a new democracy. That is where it is headed for, and also with the dialogue method that is inclusive. I am making up a special team of, we could say, experts, advisors, counselors. I am focused on the forms of consultations to the popular power that we apply so much permanently, and also a group of advisors, international counselors, who have offered themselves to support us, and very soon
to translate into law to a certain extent?
Yes, because the constitutional reform to be valid, a project has to be made first. The reform has to go to the National Assembly, the legislative power of Venezuela, the parliament, the only one that exists in Venezuela, the parliament elected by the people in 2020. Once the parliament approves a project, that project has to go to the streets, to the people, to the debate, to the referendum, and the one that has the last word in Venezuela to approve a reform, to change the constitution, is the sovereign, it is the direct democracy, it is the people.
And Mr. President, the whole world at this moment is looking forward to two takeovers that will take place in the next few days. On one hand, that of the elected President of the United States, Donald Trump, in Washington, that will take place on January 20th, and yours, which will take place in a few days on January 10th. Now, the question is, how do you explain it that for so many international observers, there is the same interest between the takeover in the first power of the world and the change of command, which in this case does not occur because you have been re-elected in Venezuela? What does Venezuela have in particular to be the center of global attention?
Because there is a dispute over the control and domain of Venezuela. Venezuela was the axis of the anti-colonialist, independentist struggles exactly 200 years ago. Here we have with us the sword, the saber liberator of Carabobo, with which the liberator Simón Bolívar led on June 24, 1821, the victorious battle that made the Spanish Imperial Army retreat from lands of today's Venezuelan territories. Here we have with us the sword that the people of Lima gave them, the poor people of Lima, the indigenous people, the artisans, to declare Bolívar their liberator, their savior. These are two swords of great symbolic importance in our history, of great significance. Likewise, here we have a dagger that belonged to the great Marshal of Ayacucho, the winner 200 years ago in Ayacucho, who ended up expelling the imperial armies of Europe, of Spain, from this territory, from South America. All these symbols, the gun of the liberator Antonio José de Sucre, mark with great strength the struggles that we are waging nowadays.
It must be said, President, that we are in the presidential office.
Yes, this is office number 1 of the Miraflores Palace, which is a house, the house of the people. And precisely these symbols accompanies us daily, permanently. And it is a permanent reminder, Ramon, of where we come from, of what our project is, of where all the strength and energy of ours for the 21st century comes from. So look, the empire believed that in 2024 it could make a definite coup in Venezuela. And they played a double game. On the one hand, what I have called the diplomacy of deception, which is practiced a lot by the empires and the US empire in the world with its different modalities. The diplomacy of deception with false attraction, false offers, to try to win space and stab you in the back. Or they also apply at other times the diplomacy of deception based on blackmail, on the threat of invasion, of economic wars. We know how the US and its allies act, all their ways of acting. They thought that 2024 was the definite year. So they pursued the diplomacy of deception grounded in negotiations that we developed with the outgoing government, Joe Biden, which they fully do not comply with.
What were called the talks of Barbados, right?
Right, and the signing of the agreements, documents are there, which they do not comply with in a coarse, shameless way. On one side, they favored, financed, supported, and promoted the resurgence of a far-right fascist bloc that controlled a good part of the Venezuelan opposition. So they would pave the way for a great conspiracy, the Trojan horse they needed to destroy countries. And they believed, once again, as they believed in the coup d'etat of 2002, underestimating us, underestimating the people of Venezuela. They believed they had the perfect plan, but a small detail. They didn't count up with the immense power of the historical bloc of the Bolivarian Revolution. They didn't realize that in Venezuela there is a powerful historical bloc and that Venezuela has a perfect fusion among the popular power, the military power, and the police power. This is what we call the union and the civil military police fusion, which I have been describing as the popular military police fusion of the great historical bloc, taking into account Gramsci's concept of the Bolivarian Revolution developed by Chavez. So this year we have shattered to pieces the imperialist plan in its attempt of destroying the Bolivarian Revolution. And they keep up their target, stubborn, obsessed, of destabilizing Venezuela. And then they try to become, just as they turned the July 28th presidential elections into a global election, and now with social media, even more, the manipulation of social media. How many elections were there in 2024 in the world? Hundreds of elections.
Dozens at least. One of the most electoral years in history.
But there were only 2 elections, the one in Venezuela on July 28th and the United States in November. They turned it into a global election. Now they want on January 10th to be a global election. A global office, try to do what they haven't achieved, nor will they achieve, which is to destabilize our homeland, to destabilize our democracy, to derail Venezuela, and try to take it down to the path of chaos, division, take it down to the path of confrontation, and with chaos, division, violence, to make a call to a foreign military intervention, which is the ultimate dream of this mindless idea of Venezuelan fascism of the far right, to try to pursue a method of maximum pressure, violence, and destruction of the revolutionary forces of Chavism. Plainly, Venezuela is at peace tranquility, calm, and sure of its destiny, sure of its path. And just as we have known to tear down, to demolish, to dismantle internal conspiracies, Trojan horses, internal fascism, external pressures, conspiracies, mercenaries, terrorists, during these 25 years, we have already had the learning and the capacity to guarantee to the people of Venezuela and to the peoples of the world who support us, who love the people of Venezuela, that Venezuela will follow its path of independence, peace, and revolution. Be sure of that.
And as you were saying, President, the media campaign against Venezuela has been going on for 25 years, and this campaign, we have seen it intensify after your electoral victory on July 28th. In particular, the international conservative media have modified without hesitation the story of what happened the next day of the elections, what happened on July 29th. In other words, when organized armed groups attacked a series of official institutions and caused about 30 deaths. The version that has been given in the international media and the social networks, that the social networks have spread, is that the victims have been caused by the authorities. So the world is a bit upside down, as Eduardo Galeano said. You have reacted against these lies, and you have launched, not only you have relaunched the revolutionary movement, in particular with the historical bloc, but also with a great anti-fascist offensive. You have organized in Caracas a series of anti-fascist congresses, of anti-fascist movements. International anti-fascism has now taken place in Caracas in support of the Bolivarian Revolution. And I wanted to ask you, on the one hand, your opinion about this international campaign, although you just said it to a certain extent, and what is your opinion about these anti-fascist congresses that have been taking place in Caracas in the last few months?
The anti-fascist congresses in Venezuela have shown the huge support that we have in all the global movements, anti-colonialist, anti-fascist, progressive, left-wing, revolutionary, in all the humanist movements. Here in Venezuela, people have come together of the immense civilizational diversity of all continents, of all countries. And what are they looking for? They are looking for an alternative so that the unipolar world does not return, so that hegemony ends. And they are also telling the owners, the private companies, owners of social medias, of websites, of the great global media, that a different world is possible. And we support the world of reality in Venezuela. That's firstly. Secondly, the immense support of the people of Venezuela to the anti-fascist congresses. I was a witness of several experiences where, let's say, visitors, delegates of social movements, of intellectuals, politicians, of the world, of Asia, of Africa, of Europe, of the United States, of Latin America and the Caribbean, went to visit the communities of different states of the country. They were able to circulate through the streets of the different cities and towns, and they could see on the streets the will of the Venezuelan people of tranquility, of stability, of peace, of their will to be respected, that nobody gets involved in the internal affairs of Venezuela, so that the empires leave Venezuela alone, that this is the homeland of Bolivar. So, secondly, I repeat, they could see the immense support and admiration of the people of Venezuela to the anti-fascist congresses. Thirdly, I can tell you that in Venezuela, the future of the progressive movements of the world is being decided, of the revolutionary movements of the world. And I am convinced that such message, such awareness and alert are in the minds of millions of men and women from all continents, from all countries, from all religions, from all cultures, because they know that Venezuela has a very powerful voice, to denounce global crimes. It has a very powerful voice to denounce the decadence of the Western world. It has a very powerful voice to make proposals that allow the approach of the peoples of the civilizations in function of new, more egalitarian development models that propose the greatest social happiness, as was the approach of the liberator Simón Bolívar. So people were watching, just as there is manipulation of social media, of the mercenary hitmen who write articles here and there on websites or media outlets. Be certain, as I am seeing it, and we have seen it, that just as there is an immense manipulation, there is also an immense operation to defend the truth in our country and to spread. And people know what it meant in conspiracy to use the elections on July 28 and to spread violence nationwide to strike a coup with a foreign intervention. People are aware of the immense value of the effort of Venezuelan people that in 48 hours restored tranquility and peace to do justice. The justice entities in Venezuela, the Public Prosecutor's Office, the judicial system, you know that they have advanced a deep professional investigation, abided by internal law, even abided by international law, to find and hold those responsible for the acts of violence, for the hate crimes that were committed. All the people killed in the violent incidents on the fascist outburst on July 29th and 30, all were victims of these groups called the comanditos, of these groups of payoff criminals, of these groups that went out to the streets to burn, to break, because they intended, once again, it is not the first time, they intended with this Guarimba, this uprising, this 2024 version uprising, to trigger a commotion of such magnitude that it would give justification to the U.S. government and its right-wing allies to try to put military force in Venezuela and to turn Venezuela into an area of combat, of conflict. But there is strength, there is awareness, there is capacity, and in 48 hours peace was reestablished constitutionally, justice has been done, justice will continue to be done, and I can tell you with absolute conviction that if you go out to the streets of any community, anywhere in the country, and you ask Venezuelans, do you want the Guarimba uprisings to return? Do you want violence to return? Do you want hate crimes to return? Attacks, intolerance? More than 90% of this country will answer you in one voice. We don't want intolerance, we don't want hate, we don't want division, we don't want violence. We are headed towards peace, and I can assure you that this man who is here, that you know very well, Nicolas Maduro, re-elected president, is the greatest guarantee, together with our people, of peace, stability, and independence of Venezuela. In a few days, from the 7th to the 12th of January, there will be an immense anti-fascist Congress of the world's youth, and there will be the second chapter of the Anti-Fascist Congress of Social and Political Movements, so we are waiting for the arrival of over 2,000 leaders, men and women of social and political movements from all continents, who come together with Venezuela to celebrate the victories of anti-fascism, because in Venezuela the future is being decided of the struggle against this macabre model that is trying to emerge.
Mr. President, we're going to talk about the economy. It is an extremely important issue, and I wanted to ask you, a few days ago, the Executive Vice President, Delcy Rodriguez, announced that you had decided to change the name of the Ministry of the Popular Power of Petroleum, which will now be called the Ministry of Popular Power of Hydrocarbons. And Delcy Rodriguez said that this change translated a strategic turn in the way of addressing the energy issue. I would like to ask you to explain this strategic turn, and what does it consist of?
Well, we defined in 2016 18 engines, 18 drivers. Then came all the criminal sanctions, all the economic, commercial, and financial persecution against Venezuela. And we were very patient with the breakthrough of all these 18 boosters. One of these drivers is the hydrocarbon engine. Seeing as the whole, Venezuela is a power in terms of energy. We have the largest oil reserve on earth. We have the fourth largest gas reserve. We have a powerful petrochemical industry. So we are addressing the hydrocarbon drive as a very important engine in our development. So with the vision not depending again or just breaking the dependence on hydrocarbon engines. So we want it to be a powerful engine for the development of the country's economy, a powerful lever, but without depending again on it, because we have already made the decision to build a productive economy that sustains itself far beyond oil, and I think we have made good progress, more diversified, with diverse properties or, let's say, potential development capacities to guarantee and meet internal needs and enhance the exportable vocation and substitution of imports that the country needs.
And Mr. President, for a few years now, Venezuela has been experiencing what analysts have described as an economic miracle. According to figures from independent and reliable international organizations, Venezuela saw a growth of 12% in 2022. Last year, in 2023, the growth was 5%, and probably when the figures are published, the growth of the year 2024, which has just ended, will be 6%. And all this with a country besieged, a country subjected to dozens of criminal, coercive, unilateral measures. Analysts are wondering, how do you do it? What is your recipe?
First of all, we have a plan. Here I have, look, the review. This is my work document, my work agenda. I am not going to show it to you. And here we permanently follow the economic strategy. The first thing was to establish in 2016 with great clarity the real boosters for national breakthrough, national development. The second thing was to establish the need to build macroeconomic balances typical of a productive effort. And thirdly, it was to build a development strategy that would allow us in a self-sustaining way with our own effort. I always quote Artigas, the great liberator of the eastern band of Uruguay, when I say, let's not expect anything but ourselves. That look, I have it here. I have it in I kept it in our mind, in my mind, in the development strategy of each sector of the national economy. We set ourselves great goals. Here we are ratifying them. A fundamental goal was to produce food. I did a re-engineering of the great Agro-Venezuela mission that Commander Chavez created. And we did a re-engineering in debate with the national farmer movement, and we assume in practice actions that allow to free the productive forces of the field. And Venezuela went from an 80% dependence on food products from abroad. We had 120 years buying all the food from overseas. Why? Because look, the oil check. We went from an 80% dependence we surpassed from an 80% shortage to a 100% supply of agroecological products, of organic products, looking for answers with the productive movement of the field, with the farmer movement, with the field entrepreneurship. It is fundamental what is the development of the field, of the land, of food. And we have been recovering the capacity of the Venezuelan industry, which was up to 80%. Venezuela has an important industry in all sectors with a good level. Commander Chavez made a good industrial investment in the country through credit systems, etc., etc. We got to have the Venezuelan industrial system at 80%. This year, globally, we are closing at 45%. And next year, I have proposed to the Vice President, to the Director of the Economy, Delcy Rodriguez, that we have to get to 70% to complete the cycle of substitution of imports, which is a necessary cycle to break the negative cycle of imports of things that we can produce here. We can produce everything here, and in that way strengthen the new cycle of import vocations, which allows for the entry of convertible currencies to strengthen this change system of Venezuela, to have money for many other things. Here I have the plan. All this I have already proposed the 7 transformations. The first of all, the great economic transformations of Venezuela, to continue advancing in the development of a strong economy. Notice that we have developed a strong internal market. Right now, we had an 80% upsurge in national internal trade in the last quarter. This is what I have described as an overheating of internal consumption, which shows you great purchasing and consumption capacity of the population, and shows you a high level of supply by internal producers, but also by imports. So we have to find a balance there, that is not so much imports, that everything is produced here. This is a fundamental element. We have good economic figures. We were talking about the year 2022, 12%
growth.
I correct you if you allow me. We had 15% growth in the year 2022. It was the first year of growth after the missiles, the economic criminal sanctions. The missiles fell and we endured, we resisted, and the first year of real economic growth was in 2022, 15%. The second year was 2023. In 2023, we had 5.5%. In 2024, according to all data, scientific, statistic, technical data, we will exceed 9% of the growth of gross domestic product, with a very high level of growth in the real economy, and also in the economy of hydrocarbons, which we are recovering, Ramonet, with our own investment, with our own technology, with the immense effort, wisdom, and preparation and training of the working class of the Venezuelan hydrocarbons, with their knowledge, because you must know that we continue to suffer the economic persecution against our oil industry, our gas industry. So there are good elements. We are having in 2024 the lowest inflation in the past 20 years. We are having in 2024, we have closed with 14 trimesters of growth. So it is all auspicious to assume 6 years as we are going to assume, to take of building up an economic self-sustaining productive model that supplies the country, that develops its exporting vocation capacity, and that generates wealth to recover all the social and labor rights of our working class and our people.
Mr. President, continuing what you were just saying, now that the economic situation is improving remarkably, what measures can you announce at this time of celebration to improve the daily life of Venezuelan in the year 2025?
Well, here I have the plan. First of all, to consolidate the food self-sufficiency and and integrity of the country and the sporting capacity. We are making great investments in the Venezuelan field to advance in such a goal. Secondly, to consolidate the stability of the Venezuelan exchange system and the fight against inflation. This is vital to have the best conditions for the country's economic and social breakthrough. Here, there is a set of elements that are well articulated, well activated. We must continue to guarantee investments in our own technology with our allies around the world to stabilize the electric service and to continue to stabilize the internal fuel consumption, the recovery of the entire Venezuelan refining system. These are fundamental issues, elements within the social level plan. Regarding the social level, in 2023, I created the formula for the investment of the workers' total income. And in the year 2024, we deepened it and took it beyond what we could, because the incomes depend on the country's incomes. I could tell you that we have only recovered 10% of the country's incomes. And with that, we have to invest and recover everything. But this year, 2025, we will advance in strengthening the concept of indexation and the recovery of real incomes to continue to grow to the same extent that the generation of national wealth is growing, is ramping up. Also, the plan to complete this year 2025, the recovery of 100% of the country's health establishments, health centers, with full guarantee of operation technology. We have advanced with military community brigades, which has been a miracle. And also this year, 2025, we are going to recover 100% of schools and high schools throughout the country with this wonderful formula, the Bricomiles, to work in all directions. What I was telling you, for me, is of great importance, and I put it in my priorities. This year we are going to do 6 consultations to deliver direct resources to communities, 4 of those consultations for general community projects, one of those consultations, the 5th one, for projects specifically for youth, and another one for projects for cultures, for those promoting culture, everything that has to do with the great mission, Long Live Venezuela, my beloved country, and the application of the new budget, communal budget, which has a modality that people will begin to know. And I believe in the budget fund for community projects, and we estimate that fund, we project that it will have the equivalent of $600 million more. It is the budget of the nation, put directly to the communities, and they will decide over their priorities. That is going to have an immense impact on the quality of life in the territory, in the communities. And well, we are also going to move forward, as we started in 2024, in the development of the great missions of the new generation. The great missions of the new generation, taking into account the original concept of Commander Chavez of the missions, great missions of the new generation are designed from the structural strategic point of view towards sectors that were the most hit in the economic war with the criminal sanctions of the U.S. government. The great mission, Venezuela Woman, which will continue to advance in the axis of the integrating women in a specific, particular way in the construction of that immense movement of women in the country. The great mission of Venezuela, the youth, the right of the young people to study, to work, to culture, to education. The great mission, grandparents, grandmothers, and grandfathers of the homeland. That is my great mission, because I am a grandfather of the homeland, of the human homeland. The great mission, Long Live Venezuela, my beloved homeland. Identity, culture, the independence of the spirit of the soul, of the the great mission of equality. And next to this, well, what has to do with the housing and habitats, that is the re-empowerment and unification in a single effort of the great mission Housing Venezuela and the great mission New Neighborhood Tricolor Neighborhood. That is already beautiful. It is well elaborated, and I think that we are going to advance with new methods that people want, new methods to build up housing, fixed housing. We have very clear priorities. We have the plan, we have the will, we have the support of the people, and I think that the year 2025 and these years that will pass will be truly exceptional, wonderful.
And President, we are now going to move to the subject of technology and society. I know you're very interested.
Will you accept a cup of tea, Maloguillo, with lemon and ginger?
With great pleasure.
Very good for health.
So I would like to address a subject that I know you are very interested in, the subject of social networks and their influence on our societies. Recently, several governments have taken measures to limit access to social networks. For example, Albania decided to ban TikTok for a year. For example, Brazil decided to ban access to electronic devices, smartphones, in school establishments. And Australia has decided to ban social networks for everyone under 16. So I would like to ask you if your government in Venezuela is thinking about adopting any of these precautionary measures.
Well, the first thing is that we have to understand the global phenomenon of social media and how private companies are owners of the immense power of communication that no one has ever had before in the history of humanity. So they reach through the phone, through the telephone, to millions, thousands of millions of men and women on Earth. And the capacity they have created, first for economic and commercial reasons, to influence on people's minds. Capacity that they have already developed with the marketing that we know. We know you studied that very well in this book. This is your 2007 book where you study the capacity of manipulation and influence on radio, press, and television at the moment. And right. Now they have taken this to a level never before that we have never thought. And they know your personal taste, Ramonet, and yours too. What do you like? If you like kittens or puppies, or you like a kind of soda or meal, they know all your personal likes, but they don't stay there. They have already taken this to the political level for manipulation of electoral processes, for manipulating political processes, for destabilizing countries. In fact, the great powers of the world have taken over social media of their countries. The People's Republic of China, India, Russia, and the United States, which controls the large private companies of billionaires, owners of Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, YouTube, and now TikTok. Because in the end, TikTok has ended up succumbing to blackmail and control of the powerful United States. First, we have to understand, and I have studied a lot about the subject because it is not easy. Indeed, I have seen people who understand it theoretically, but they are victims of social media. Because many people know about social media, but they are a victim too. I started reading this book by Juan Carlos Monedero. Juan Carlos Monedero brought it to me in the days of the fascism breaking Caracas. I recommend it to you all. I was reading them this year. And journalism journalism at the service of the extreme right, and you read this book and you think they wrote it to interpret what happened in Venezuela on July 27, 28, 29, and 30. This book was applied in Venezuela for a coup d'etat by the fascists. We know the book by heart, and in practice is a very valuable book. And there is a book that also fell into my hands. They gave it to me by Jonathan Haidt, a U.S. citizen. I do not know him, but it's a very good book. A very good book, bestseller of the New York Times, The Anxious Generation, Why Our Social Media Are Causing an Epidemic of Mental Illnesses Among Our Young People. It was written by an U.S. intellectual. I recommend it.
The word of the year has been brain rot.
What the social media just rot the reactions of the brain of, and I have another book, The Enemy Knows the System, Manipulations of Ideas, People. So this is a group of Venezuelans, 2 officers, a captain of Navy, Francisco Felipe Lopez, and the mayor, Jose Gregorio Silva Fernandez, The War of Information in the 21st Century. Extraordinary book, extraordinary about this phenomenon of Venezuelan military. Well, I have a book that fell early in my hands, my Michel Desmourget, More Books and Less Screen. How to End the Digital Criminals. Really, there is a lot of research material, and we are forced to understand it.
Absolutely.
Because we are forced to protect the mental health of our countries, but especially we are very compelled to protect the mental health of children, of the youth that is growing. Because that concept that they call brain rot, it is already studied. It is affecting cognitive development of brain functions of our children dedicated to screens, to telephones. Here in Venezuela, in these days, the Constitutional Court of the Supreme Court of Justice, which deals with this issue, a group of parents, schools, and high schools, filed an appeal as a result of one of the viral TikTok challenges. There were 2 deaths of a boy and a girl due to these viral challenges, and lately another person was burned down and had 70% destruction of his body transmitted live, a viral TikTok challenge. The Venezuelan state acted through the competent authority CONATEL, which is the National Telecommunications Council. This group of parents acted before the Constitutional Court. The Constitutional Court called a set of hearings, judicial events, and issued a first sentence, clear, resounding, to force TikTok to open an office in Venezuela and submit to Venezuelan laws. Secondly, it has imposed a fine for the equivalent of $10 million. And thirdly, it has said that in case this is not fulfilled, it will take more severe measures of protection in the Venezuelan space. All I can say is that I put myself at the service of those in humanity who want to defend the right to mental health, and the Constitutional Court of Venezuela to do what must be done to protect our children, girls, young people, and all society. We have already seen the fascist outbreak. TikTok was the main campaign tool for the fascist outburst in Venezuela on July 27, 28, 29, and 30. I can tell you that I was in this same office. I was sitting right here on July 29 and 30. And I logged into my TikTok account. I have a TikTok account. You've seen it, haven't you? I logged into my TikTok account and I open it. I'm going to open it so you can see. And here I have a very nice video of Alberto Ibarreto. Well, here in the TikTok account, of every 10 videos that came to me, 8 were promoting violence on the streets. Are you going to tell me that TikTok didn't know? Huh? Are you going to tell me that they use what is called selective censorship? They censor whoever they want. They take your, they ripped your account. They take your video away. But when it was violence against Venezuela, they promote it. And now they are promoting these viral challenges that have made Albania suspended for a year. That in Australia they have taken radical measures as well. And I'm sure that in 2025, we will see in the world how laws and decisions to safeguard citizens from the infections of anti-values that go against mental health that not only TikTok promotes, but many social networks boost.
And Mr. President, in the same perspective, not exactly the topic, but in that way?
Bon appetit.
Thank you very much. I would like to know your reflections, since I know you have worked a lot on the subject, on the issue of artificial intelligence. Because above all, the type of international framework, in the perspective of what you were saying at the end of your intervention, what international framework should be defined to, on the one hand, not prevent technological scientific reflection on artificial intelligence from continuing, which can contribute a lot to society, but on the other hand, to limit the harmful effects of artificial intelligence and the threats that they can represent in the future? Many scientists are warning against this.
Artificial intelligence, without a doubt, it is a technological breakthrough that surprises humanity. They say that there are 4 sources of artificial intelligence worldwide. 2 have the United States, China has another, and the other Europe. That is what is known so far. I have studied the subject a lot. Here I have some books that I recommend. This one was given to me by Hector Rodriguez on my birthday. No, by Christmas. My Christmas, I am already reading it. The Era of Artificial Intelligence and Our Human Future. It has several writers. Eric Kissinger wrote it before dying, Eric Smith and Daniel Huttenlocher. I am working on them, and here they explain how artificial intelligence began, emerged, what were the first supercomputers, how were they fed. Here I also have a book that was given to me. I am reading the non-intelligence of the outline of the
yes, I know
human
Mariano Sigmund
backgrounds.
very well. An Argentinian boy, a very brilliant scientist.
Right, and here a descendant of the Japanese Michio Kaku, quantum supremacy, the technological revolution that will change everything.
Quantum computers can do thousands of millions of operations where it used to take centuries, now it takes seconds.
It is what they are already calling the artificial superintelligence, and our countries have the obligation to know this technology, to know it very well. Now it is combined, even Ramonet, I have said it a lot, but you know that it covers up a lot of things that one says. They combine artificial intelligence beyond the big data to get to know the countries. And social media are already directed by artificial intelligence for influencing segments.
Algorithms are already artificial intelligence.
And bots. For example, they know your social media. They know all your history, all your life. And now, everything you publish, fundamentally, when you get comments, you get particular comments. I was telling I was telling an artist the other day, an artist who started attacking from Miami, the far right. Well, because he spoke nicely of Venezuela, a famous artist from Venezuela. He spoke nicely of Venezuela. He came to Venezuela, and then afterwards he complained. I received thousands of messages, and I told him the messages that came to you, they were bots, but bots, robots are no longer a warehouse where there are a few people with phones sending messages. No, that was already said. Was already deleted. Now it is artificial intelligence applied to social media, and they know all your backgrounds, and they know where to hit you. So they threaten a daughter, they threaten a loved one, they tell you something that can offend you. So when you read the messages they send you, it is a cognitive war. It is a psychological massacre what they are trying to do. We are working on artificial intelligence. I recently opened the University of Science Humberto Fernandez Moran. It has a 4-year major in artificial intelligence engineering and artificial intelligence technology. There we are also giving courses. We are training the national staff, and also with collaboration with Cuba, with China, with Iran, with Russia, because we have to train. We are in the world of artificial intelligence, and what President Xi Jinping says, that I have read about him, a leader as enlightened as President Xi Jinping, just as it is a threat, and it poses a threat. Let's take care of ourselves of it, and it is also an opportunity. It is a great issue for the years to come.
President, let's now move to the last segment of our conversation about international politics. You have traveled a lot to the Middle Eastern region. You know the Arab world well. On the other hand, here in Venezuela, there's an important Arab community. In particular, there's a community of Syrian origin, which is very important. And I wanted to ask you, were you surprised by what happened on December 8th when insurgent forces entered Damascus almost without resistance and the Bashar state was overthrown? What analysis do you make of these?
Well, I think that we are still assessing. I don't think those who came to power know how they got there or why they got there. We see permanent statements and actions. Let's hope that peace be reached, and we would be able to know the truth about what happened. It is known that there were very powerful forces that acted with the greatest technology, with the cutting-edge technology. All those days I was in communication with our ambassador, a great ambassador, a great comrade. He was there until just a few days ago when he left Damascus because of the threats of assassination of diplomats, and I was aware of all the incidents. It drew my attention how they took over social media and how the Syrian state did not have the tools to prevent it, and how they managed to impose digital terrorism on social media, and paralyzed the entire society. There are many ways to explain what happened. Let's wait for the right time. All this leaves lessons for us, for those fighting for freedom, for independence, for the war for us, the men and women of the South. It teaches us lessons, very important lessons about the consolidation of a democratic, deep state with people, with unity, the consolidation of military forces, well-trained, well-prepared. So it teaches us lessons about the management of social media. The Syrian society is a complex society. In Venezuela, we have a large community. We have a deep friendship, a great respect towards the Syrian people, because the Syrian people have one of the original civilizations. The civilization was born there, between the Tigris and the Euphrates, in that wonderful land, between that today's Iraq, what today is Syria, Egypt, the wonders of the world. And next to all of them, the Persian culture and the sacred lands of Palestine, Lebanon, where our Lord Jesus Christ was. So it is a wonderful history from the human civilizational point of view, from the cultural, religious point of view, of the region. What we hope, aspire, is that that region finds its own way and consolidates its own model sooner or later. That is going to happen. And those who take account of victories will regret it, because that Syrian people is a people that we know is wonderful, and it is also has a telluric strength, deep military strength, and they will not able to subdue it.
Mr. President, a few weeks ago in Baku, Azerbaijan, not far from the Middle East, the COP29 was closed, the World Climate Summit. I remember that you were at a climate summit in Copenhagen. One of the conclusions of the climate summit is that we have to reduce the emissions of greenhouse gases, in particular those emitted by the carbonated energies such as oil, gas, coal. Now the question is, how does Venezuela, which is a great producer of hydrocarbons, as you mentioned, contribute to the collective effect to try to reduce the possibility of climate change?
Here, those who have to contribute are the countries that consume the most. The United States, the European countries that have destroyed climate and that wanted to create a kind of carbon bonus from Copenhagen, which was a false, deceitful offer. Bid. The diplomacy of deceit. They offered to create a carbon bonus fund for them to pay for the pollution that they created there in the north to the countries that do not pollute. Venezuela is not a country that has an emission of greenhouse gases. On the contrary,
the entire Amazon rainforest is a producer of oxygen.
And well, humanity has to start moving forward without a doubt towards non-polluting forms of energy. So we are fully incorporated in that. We have a group of scientists in the highest government that are moving forward as a country towards decarbonizing sources and producing all our power grid, our electricity. Now we produce 75% of our electricity from hydrological sources, and that percentage is going to grow in the years to come. We are also investing in solar energy, which is called photovoltaics, and I put a little name so that people do not understand energy caused and produced by the sun, which is an ultra-clean energy. The solar panel that is advancing so much now on the solar panel that produces electricity. I believe that humanity right now has the conditions to move forward in gigantic steps towards alternative sources of non-polluting energy production. You can see that. Lately, our Vice President Elsie Rodriguez was in China in several cities, and they showed her a technology, Ramonet, that drives you crazy.
For energy production?
Yes. And China has advanced, for example, in what vehicles are. It has advanced in vehicles that are supported by direct solar energy. You don't even have to connect them for them to consume. We are already negotiating with one of the Chinese companies for the production of electric vehicles to assemble in Venezuela to produce electric vehicles with solar energy. There are wonderful things that technology allows, and it is also very important. I have explained to a group of young people these days what it has to do with regenerative agriculture. They are applying it in some places in Africa to recover totally deserted arid areas as we recover forested areas, defending them like the Amazon, as we regenerate areas that are already desertified, as we strengthened microhabitats through a green regenerative process I believe that we will be able to balance the burden of the immense damage that in 150 years predatory capitalism has done to rivers, forests, seas, and to the whole environment in general. It is one of the priority lines of our action.
Mr. President, on November 24th in Uruguay, the candidate Yamandu Orsi of the Broad Front won the second round of the election, and consequently the left is returning to power in this country. With the left in power in Uruguay, there are already in Latin America 11 countries governed by the left-wing parties. On the other hand, a few days ago, the 20th anniversary of ALBA was celebrated, this regional integration mechanism that Commander Chavez and Fidel Castro have founded. How do you see the issue of regional integration today? Do you think that with more left-wing governments in Latin America, that for a long time the issue of regional integration can advance more quickly?
I think that this new process that is taking place has an explanation for the premature, rapid, early emergence of the alternatives that the right wing has created. Oligarchies, social media. It is a tremendous exhaustion. What alternatives have they created in the face of the exhaustion of a social democratic formula, the so-called, namely progressive fascism? What is Milei? Milei is an extremist response to the failure of a model that they tried to apply.
Neoliberalism.
Still within the limits of neoliberalism, and Milei can be an alternative for the Argentinian people. Milei, with his madness, his histrionism, his extremism, his sadistic insensitivity against the people, his model of destruction of the state of the Argentinian economy, can he be an alternative for Argentinians? No, never. So surely, Milei will have to come up with an own alternative for Argentina, with ideas of advancements, with ideas of social justice, of equality, of more democracy to the Argentinian people. This is happening in all countries. And I think that the longed for first spring that the progressive movement had taught many lessons. I live it up close. I was the foreign minister of Commander Chavez, and I saw the first spring row with our boss, our commander. I saw how the ALBA emerged in 2004, how Petrocaribe emerged, how the strengthening of the ALBA to Petrocaribe recovered the peoples of the continent, how the Miracle Mission emerged, which served over 80 million poor people in our country, how the mission of literacy emerged, Yo Si Puedo, how the health missions emerged for all our peoples, how Petrocaribe gave stability to the whole continent, practically 18 states favored by Petrocaribe, and how from that union between Fidel and Chavez, the ALBA then expanded the return of the Sandinista front and Commander Daniel Ortega, and the triumph of Evo Morales in Bolivia, the triumph of Correa, the triumph of Lula, the arrival of Nestor Kirchner and of Peronism, which was a great surprise. The leadership was brave, very brave, determined, transforming Nestor Kirchner. The emergence and arrival of the Broad Front with Tabaré, then with Pepe, and how the whole Central America and the South America, it was the arrival of the Farabundo Martí front in El Salvador and the unification of President Zelaya and the ALBA, how a fresh spring took place that had a main characteristic, the union in diversity, the respect among all leaderships and national projects. Surely there are always differences. How can we all be equal in political thought, in doctrines? But it was achieved under the leadership of Commander Chavez and the leaders of that moment, a level of coexistence that allowed the birth of UNASUR. It must be remembered because I recall it perfectly on April 17, 2007 on the island of Margarita, when the concept of UNASUR was born. We must recall that Alan Garcia was there, the right-wing president in Peru. We must recall that in that meeting, the birth of UNASUR, there was Álvaro Uribe Vélez, paramilitary leader of the Colombian far right. The union in diversity of left-wing progressive movements and the union in diversity of other ideologies of the continent. And then I recall it perfectly, Caracas, Venezuela. On December 2nd and 3rd, 2011, Commander Chavez was already sick, being treated, and the Latin American Caribbean State Community was founded with the 33 states of Latin America, from Mexico to Patagonia, and all the Caribbean, for the first time united. We could say the great dream of the Congress of the Liberator Simón Bolívar, a great unitary dream. So let's draw lessons from that first spring, from what is emerging now, that allows tolerance, understanding, and most of all, understanding in depth that we need to unite Latin America and the Caribbean to be able to build up a bloc of forces, a confederation of forces, of countries and governments that allows us to move to the rest of the 21st century. There is a lot of intrigue, Ramonet, a certain word. There is a lot of intrigue to split us, to try to say that the good left and the bad left, the good progressive and bad progressivism. Let's put aside the intrigue. Let's face it and have a clear plan for the union of Latin America and the Caribbean.
Mr. President, the elected president for the United States, Donald Trump, has announced a few days ago that he appointed a former ambassador, Mr. Richard Grenell, as presidential envoy for special missions, and in particular, he has entrusted him with monitoring relations with Venezuela. What opinion does this initiative deserve for you?
I think it's fine. I have said, let's hope that the U.S. elected president, Donald Trump, takes office in the Casa on January 20th, and after he arrives in the White House, we will see. If you asked me, what is the policy of Bolivarianism in the 21st century, we, the Bolivarians in the 21st century? What is the policy that Commander Chavez taught me? And what is the policy that I have practiced with the United States? I would tell you, dialogue, respect, and understanding. Here on this side, in this presidential chair, will be Nicolás Maduro, with the experience of all these years, and I always going to be ready to move on for relations of respect, of dialogue, of cooperation with the government of the United States, with the U.S. society, and, well, all the people of Venezuela. I hope that is the direction, the destiny of our relations.
You'll receive him if he comes.
Well, let's hope that Donald Trump arrives first at the White House, and then we will see.
All right, Mr. President. So, last question. The international situation is very worrisome. Today, we have already talked about some of these issues. A genocide has been committed for the past 15 months, and the wars are multiplying, not only in the Middle East, in Lebanon, in Syria, in Yemen, but also in Africa, in Sudan, in the Sahel, in the Congo, inequalities, migrations, the issue of climate, and the general sentiment of the citizenship around the world is that there is no international authority. The world works without a guide, and to continue to believe in the United Nations system, do you think there's reason in other international institutions?
I think we are in a transition of the hegemonic imperial world that has lasted centuries, I could say millennia. But particularly, the world we know now is a world that emerged from the Second World War. There was a great change in the 90s because the great power was the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, and the world of real socialism, which was neither socialism nor real, was nothing. It collapsed. Now a new correlation of forces has emerged where there are great superpowers. The superpower of the 21st century is called the Chinese People's Republic. Other superpowers have emerged. The Russian Federation is another of the superpowers. India, which in the past was called Bharat, a legendary name of a people that I love a lot, the people of India, are like the three most important superpowers and a set of intermediate and advanced powers, such as the Islamic Republic of Iran, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Turkey, the Republic of South Africa, which are intermediate powers in the process of development, and independent countries and regions have emerged. In Africa, Africa is said to be the continent of power of the future with its economic growth that it will have, and at the forefront there are important countries such as Egypt, Tunisia, Algeria, among others, Ethiopia, Nigeria, the whole process of decolonization of the old French colonies, the new axis that is emerging. And here in Latin America, we also have Brazil, which is the continental country that is destined, condemned Brazil to be the great South American and Latin American superpower. Mexico too. Mexico, which has an excellent driver. It had an excellent driver for 6 years, President López Obrador. Now it has an excellent President, Claudia Sheinbaum. So there is a rearrangement of the world forces, of the correlation of forces, and that has its effect on the multilateral organism that we have, which is the United Nations. The United Nations is currently experiencing a serious exhaustion process due to the dispute over power, because the Western empires have decided to use their military power, their military technology to threaten the world, to attack the world, and to try to create conflicts in general. The conflict that they created, Ukraine and Russia, the massacre against the Palestinian people, which is a war of extermination. As Pope Francis said, it is not a war, it is a genocide. The massacre against the people of Lebanon. Now the shellings on the people of Syria, the latent threats against the people of Iraq, of Iran, of Jordan,
of Yemen.
Of Yemen. So there is a rearrangement. Let's see what will arise from this stage. We believe in international law. We denounce when they are used a mechanism of the United Nations to favor the interests of the United States or the global Western empire. And we are in a dispute, in a struggle. I am sure that in the end the universal values will prevail, international law, and in the end the interests of the peoples of the world. But most of all, at the end of this path, the historical rise will prevail, the historical legacy of the peoples of the global south will prevail. So let's understand that we are in a transition, in a very hard fight for power. Let's embrace the great causes that defend our peoples. And from Venezuela we say, with Bolivar, let's advance towards the balance of the world, where we can exist with our identity, with our project and our pride of being Venezuelans, Latin Americans, and Caribbeans. So we have a lot of elements in the historical legacy to be able to understand and grasp the future that belongs to us. Chavez said, Ramonet, he told us, it's actually 30 years ago. I recall it on these days of December in 1994, we were elaborating ideas for the future, and he started talking about the multipolar world. And that youth, so young that we were there, by that time we were elaborating the concept of the multipolar world. And then he told the people when we went out to the streets, we went from neighborhood to neighborhood, from square to square with him, and he said, they stole from us the 20th century, the 19th century, but the 21st century will be ours, and it will be a multipolar century. Here we are in the middle of the battle. It is our century. No one is going to take it away from us. Let's have that security.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And again, Happy New Year to you, to the people of Venezuela, and well,
Happy New Year to you.
As we say now.
Of course, and here at your service, and read to all of those who are listening to us on social media, and here in Battle and Victory. Thank you very much.